Hey folks, Fan and Fixer here with you again, and as promised, I'm going to talk about super glue versus plastic glue today, and some other glues as well. When building your models, you usually have a pretty wide range of choices as to what to use. Now, almost everybody will go for some kind of a super glue. I don't want to say almost everybody, but a lot of people go for the super glue, and it has its uses, and it's pretty good overall. Then, of course, you can use genuine Citadel branded plastic glue or any other plastic glue in the world. On the basis of everything, I'm kind of a plastic glue guy. I prefer, when building plastic miniatures, to use plastic glue. What does it mean? You can't take them apart. They are very hard to get apart, and when you do get them apart, generally speaking, you have a lot of work to do to fix the tearing and scraping that happens when you pull plastic glued models apart. With super glue, you don't have to worry about that, but also with super glue, you have some other problems as well. The assumption I'm making here is that we're gluing miniatures together, plastic to plastic. If you're doing something else, obviously you're going to have to resort to a super glue or an epoxy or something like that, some other type of contact cement. The two biggest things you need to remember when gluing are tensile strength and shear strength. Now, tensile strength is the strength of a material to withstand loads that tend to try to pull it apart. Shear strength is the component of adhesion that tries to avoid yield or structural failure when the material is twisted or in some other way rather than just pulling or compressing. What super glue has is really good tensile strength, but really lousy shear strength, which is one of the things that we like about it because it allows us to take our models apart if we have to. But again, it also leads to the problem of if you drop a model, it's going to come apart. It has almost no impact resistance whatsoever. So with super glue, again, you have that lots of tensile strength, but no shear strength whatsoever. Basically, you can't pull your model apart, but you can twist it apart. The impact resistance with super glue is very, very low. It doesn't handle vibration well. It doesn't handle any kind of shearing forces at all. And don't ever forget, if you're using super glue, don't ever use it around clear plastics, because the chemical reaction will cause them to craze or get a film over them. It's a chemical reaction. It's one of the things you just can't do. If you need to get super glue apart, you can always use acetone, which most people think of as nail polish remover. The problem is most nail polish removers that are out in the stores these days contain no acetone because it's a pretty caustic chemical. But you can buy acetone at paint stores, big box stores, any kind of hardware type stores. You can get big jugs of acetone for reasonably cheap. And it will definitely uncure super glue. So if you're buying those bottles of Uncure It and you're paying like $5.99 for something that big, stop. Go to the hardware store, get some acetone, and enjoy. The other problem I have with super glue is if you use too much, and from what I've seen, a lot of people use too much, it has a tendency to spill over and sort of create lumps in the model, especially around the joints. You can see that little ridge where the super glue kind of oozed out. And it doesn't take paint exactly like the rest of our stuff does, the plastic does. So you can it's almost as if your eye gets drawn to that area where there's a seam. With plastic glues, chemical reaction they're doing is actually melting the two plastics. It's almost like welding for plastic. You're actually melting the surface of both pieces, and then as it dries and evaporates away and cools, if you will, the pieces become welded together, which is why it's whenever you try to take them apart, you're basically going to tear the model apart as you do it. With plastic glue, though, the model's not going to come apart even if you drop it. It has resistance. It has both tensile strength and shear strength. It resists being pulled and it resists being twisted because basically it's made it one solid mass of plastic. Of course, the drawback for plastic glue is if you're doing something with resin, plastic glue will not work at all. If you're trying to glue plastic to anything else, it won't work because it relies on that melting process. And it doesn't melt resins, it doesn't melt metal, obviously, or wood or paper or anything like that. There's a whole bunch of different types of plastic glue. You have, if you remember back in the day, the tester's tube, which is a very, very thick gel. That stuff gives you a crazy amount of time to work with pieces. And it's especially good if you're building something with large surface areas, say the hull of a Rhino or the hull of a Land Raider, where you're gluing something really, really long and you need to get all the little edges meshed together. That gel type plastic glue gives you a lot of working time, but it also welds it together. There's also a heck of a lot of the different liquid plastic glues. Like I said, GW makes their own branded. There's 10X7R, there's Plastruct, Plastaweld. Micromark makes this stuff called Same Stuff. All of these are the exact same basic material. Methylethyl ketone, which is usually abbreviated as MEK, is a readily available substance that you can get at paint stores and big box stores. You know, your Lowe's, your Home Depot. I don't know what they have in Europe, but same type of thing, any kind of big box home hardware type place. You can get methylethyl ketone, and you know, a jug like this, I don't know how much it costs. You know, with the Citadel logo, I'm sure it costs somewhat more than anywhere else. And the same thing with 10X7R and the Plastruct, Plastaweld, and all those. They tend to be pricey. If you go to the big box store and you get a big jug of MEK and keep refilling containers like this, you'll have a lifetime supply of plastic glue, and it's very, very thin, very thin. MEK is it's the thinnest liquid glue I think that's out there. So you have to put it on with a pinpoint applicator. The little needle applicators are fantastic for putting that stuff on. But yeah, save yourself some money. Just go buy some MEK and plastic glue to your heart's content. One thing to remember about all plastic glues is that they're on, at least in the US, they're considered to be VOCs, volatile organic compounds. So technically they're poisonous. And they do smell funny, and don't drink them because that's highly not recommended. Some of the other things I've seen people do or not do with glue, there's all kinds of tricks you can do with different types of glue. For instance, if you have a small gap in a model, let's say shoulder pads on a Liberator or something like that, sometimes it's kind of annoying to get out the green stuff, mix it all up, put it in the gap, form it, smooth it, wait for it to dry, smooth it over. That can get to be a real pain. If you have regular old Arm & Hammer baking soda or any brand of baking soda, if you take your gap and you fill it with baking soda and then just put the tiniest drop of super glue on there, the baking soda will just suck in the super glue and it will form a rock hard cement. It is an amazingly good gap filler. I use it for anything that isn't Forge World, basically, where the gaps are huge. Anywhere where you can get the baking soda to pack in and stay tight, it makes a nice smooth join. You don't have to spend the rest of your evening sanding on it. Another thing about super glues, you want to store them in a cool, dry place. Refrigerator is the best thing. If you have a freezer, even better. An unopened thing of super glue has a shelf life of about 12 months. Longer if it's been refrigerated or even in a freezer. Don't worry, it won't freeze. But once you've opened it, especially, you know, a tube this size or a container this size, it has a reasonable shelf life of about a month to 2 months. These caps are not exactly the most airtight, and since the thing that causes super glue to set is air and moisture are going to leak in here, and it is going to degrade your super glue. So when they sell it in jugs this big, I often wonder why they're doing it. They're just getting us to buy these things every few months, which is, you know, good marketing, I guess. So yeah, do yourself a favor. Buy super glue in the smallest container you can find. If you have a favorite super glue, look for the smallest container they sell. So they do have a shelf life. So if you're using your super glue and you're finding that it won't stick anything together, it's because the chemical agent in the super glue has basically gone and separated itself to the point where it can no longer form a bond. So you might as well throw it away. It's never going to get better. No matter how much zip kicker you put on it, it's going to become a very brittle and very crackable bond with that stuff. So keep it refrigerated and it will last longer. Even after you've opened it, try to keep it in the fridge as long as you have a low humidity fridge. If you're in the desert like I am, super glue tends to die out pretty quick. Another thing about the liquid plastic glues, they can be very effective mold line removers. Since these things go on with, you can put them on with a cheap paintbrush. Just be careful, don't use a paintbrush with plastic bristles. Yeah, it doesn't work real well. They glue together. You can just smear this on a mold line, give it a second or two, and then just sort of wipe it down with your finger, and the mold line's gone. So it's a very handy little trick. You'll get the hang of it. I don't actually suggest using your finger. Use like a sculpting tool or something that won't leave the ridges from your fingerprints, unless you've had your fingerprints removed because you're a master thief. So that's just some things you can do with glue. There's other types of glue out there, and for different purposes you'll need different kind of glues. Canopy glue is exactly what it's for. Canopies, plastic. The scale model world uses canopy glue to glue canopies on airplanes. It's just it's a version of white glue, but it forms a much stronger bond. If you're gluing a lot of clear pieces on two things, you might want to look at getting some canopy glue. The Formula 560 is the best one out there that I've seen. You can use it for like the neck round rods, canopies on the Eldar flyers, any of the flyers, stuff like that. When you're gluing Forge World stuff together, the big stuff, I heartily recommend using epoxy, 2-part epoxy. Just mix up a little bit on your, on a plastic sheet from one of the blister packs. Mix it up, put it on there, because the epoxy will do two things. It'll make a very, very tight bond between the pieces, and it's also a gap-filling glue. So we have all seen when two big hunks of Forge World resin come, they generally have bubbles. It will fill those bubbles, and that actually helps the bond between the parts. One other thing, as a hint, whenever you're gluing anything, whether it be super glue or plastic glue, always try to score the pieces if you can. Use your knife, use a file, use something, but put ridges in it. Put some marks in it to actually make more surface area for any of the types of glue to interact with. The more surface area these glues have, the stronger bond they have. There's also, if you're going to be gluing basing materials to your bases, a lot of people just default to using PVA, which is white glue, Elmer's in America. The problem with PVA is as it dries, it tends to over time, get a milky appearance. So if you've used a little bit too much, it can actually, over time, ruin the look of your model. And also, it is the worst bonding agent on record. It's not very strong. It has no strength whatsoever, be it tensile or shear. But that's not what it's for. It's actually a craft glue, so you can't yell at it for not doing what it's supposed to. One of the things I recommend is there's a type of glue out there called E6000. I don't remember the exact company that makes it, but it's a multi-surface glue. So you can use it to glue dissimilar surfaces together, and it works in just about everything I've ever tried it on. So if you're gluing down, just tufts to a base, you can get away with white glue. No one will ever see it. But if you're making an intricate base with, I-beams and girders and wood and all this other stuff, you might want to look at something like E6000. It's a contact type cement. It's one of those where you put it on both surfaces, you separate them so that it air dries a little bit, and then when you slap them back together, they are permanently bonded. So that's just some different kinds of glue for different purposes. But again, when you're building plastic miniatures, unless you know you're going to be taking it apart in the future, there's no reason to use something that has the drawbacks of super glue on plastic. Again, how many times do we drop our models? Well, some people are good about it and they never drop their models. Most people, like me, you'll drop one, you'll be pulling off a group for casualties and putting them in a corner, and that's what super glue is really bad at handling. It doesn't react well to impact, and again, those are shear forces, which super glue is not real good at withstanding. I am in team plastic glue. I build every plastic model with super glue or with plastic glue because I know it's going to weld the damn thing together. Also, it doesn't go bad in a month or 2 months like most of the jugs of super glue, and I hate spending money over and over again. You know, I've had this thing for about 2 months, and it's getting to the point to where it's very, very hard to keep it gluing things. So it's heading for the trash can, and I would say it's full up to about here. So yeah, that's annoying. So anyway, that's why I prefer plastic glue for plastic miniatures. And of course, but if you're gluing resin to plastic and all that other stuff, reach for the super glue. One other thing I was going to talk about for super glues is the zip kicker, the accelerator, whatever they call it, whatever the brand name you're using is. It's great stuff, makes the bond happen much, much quicker, and it does it simply by accelerating the chemical reaction. I've seen people out there say that if you use zip kicker, it actually makes a more brittle bond. Chemically, that's, I don't want to sound like an expert because I'm not, but from everything I've read, that's not true. What you're doing is you're adding liquid and a small amount of chemical to the reaction of the super glue to cause it to bond quicker. It doesn't affect the strength of the bond, it simply accelerates it, hence the term accelerator. So if people have convinced you that the accelerators are a bad thing, unless you got research that says otherwise, everything I've read says it doesn't really, it just accelerates the drying time. Now, if your glue is old and it's lost a lot of its property, nothing is going to bring it back. Accelerator will make it stick faster and it will hold faster, but it will hold much, much less. And you'll be able to just basically hit it with your finger and knock the parts off. So again, if you're using old glue and your models are coming apart, that's why. Get a new tube and play with it. And again, get the smallest tube you can find because you don't want to just sit there and waste it. So that's pretty much all I had about glues. I'm a plastic glue proponent. Again, plastic to plastic, use plastic glue. Unless you absolutely are certain you're going to want to take this model apart. How many of us actually finish gluing a model together, get it all painted, and then say, oh, you know what, I want to put a different torso on there, and then proceed to take the model apart to do that? Chances are we'll just go buy a new one. Anyway, that's my thoughts about glue. So if you got anything out of it, I'm glad. Enjoy. I'm going to try to put up a video. I've got a PowerPoint slide presentation of everything I covered that I'll put in the show notes, a link to that in the show notes. And I'm going to do a quick video showing you how baking soda can be used to make an incredible gap filler. And I think I have one other video where I'm going to show the different kinds of glue so you can see the viscosities of them all. But other than that, I'd like to hear your feedback. Tell me where I'm wrong. Tell me if I'm stupid. I'm not a chemist. I just have years of experience building models. So that's all I'm coming from. Just trying to help somebody out, not make the same dumb mistakes I did. So anyway, guys, take care, and I will see you later.